Call the meeting to order. This is the June 10, 2014 meeting of the Town Planning and Zoning Commission, Town of Fairfield. The first item on our agenda are the meeting minutes from May 27, 2014. Does everyone have a copy of those? Do I have a motion?
I'll move to approve.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Barrett, second by Commissioner Alessi. Any comments, questions, changes? Yeah, turn that off. That's my comment. Thank you. We started too early.
Trying to shut it off.
Any comments? No. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Minutes are adopted unanimously. Next section is old business. First item is zoning and subdivision regulation amendments, application of the Fairfield Bicycle, Fairfield Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee to amend sections 25 and sections 28 of the zoning regulations and section 3.10 of the subdivision regulations. Public hearing on May 27, 2014. Wagner, Alessi, Barrett, Calabrese, Jacobson, Kennelly, Coleman, Corcoran, and Francis are present.
Mr. Chairman, I could go over really quickly, outline for you what was presented at the hearing, and also remind you of the findings you need to make to approve the proposed amendments. As you mentioned, the proposed amendments to zoning, town zoning and subdivision regulations were presented by the Bike and Pedestrian Plan Advisory Committee members, and those included specifically in our zoning regulations, section 25.2.9 included amendments for proposed access, proposed connections, proposed on-site bicycle parking areas and amendments, proposed signage, public sidewalk discussion. This again is the zoning regulations I'm talking about now. And in section 28.6A, there was proposed language for off-street parking and regs describing the bicycle parking facilities. This would include the location of bike racks. And as you mentioned also, the subdivision regulation amendment were to section 3.10, having to do with sidewalk sizes, and it included things to be basically confirming compliance with the requirements of the American Disability Act, and it also has some specific recommendations for minimums of width, whether it's 5 or 6. Again, there was a discussion about snow shelves, and additional sidewalk widths from 6 to 10 may be required for the commission in higher pedestrian traffic areas as directed by the commission. That briefly was what was presented as far as the amendments. Now, as you know, as we have in the past reviewed and acted upon zoning regulations based on the state statutes that enable you to do these things, there are required findings that you have to make to approve these amendments. And I'm just going to go through those relatively quickly for you. One is that the proposed amendments must be consistent with your plan of conservation development. There was some discussion at the hearing about the consistency of these proposed amendments. And also there is attached a proposal for our plan of conservation development consistent with the proposed amendments. Second finding required by the statute is that time, experience, and reasonable planning for contemporary or future conditions should indicate the need for the proposed zone change. There was some discussion showing consistency with this finding at the hearing. The third finding that the commission must make as far as to amend their regulations is that it has been demonstrated that the proposed zone amendments are warranted and would serve the general health, welfare, and safety of the town of Fairfield. And again, there was some discussion outlined in the committee's presentation that highlighted where these proposals would be consistent with that finding. So that, Mr. Chairman, pretty much is an outline of what your procedure is for reviewing these amendments.
Thank you very much. Question to approve? Okay. Okay, we'll have we'll open it for discussion. We have a motion to approve by Commissioner Jacobson.
I'll second it.
Second by Commissioner Calabrese. Okay, a question for staff from Commissioner Alessi.
Staff, any questions as far as consistency on the proposed amendment? with our future plans or anything like that, or future developments? We found everything to be consistent, right?
Yeah, no, yeah,
Okay.
yes, we are.
Good.
Comments? Commissioner Jacobson?
I know the committee worked very hard on these amendments. I think they will benefit the town, and I think they've met all the conditions and then some. So I will support these.
Commissioner Galbraith?
I like this amendment, and that anything that's going to make the town safer is obviously a good thing. So I'm going to obviously support this.
Commissioner Barrett?
Yeah, I would agree. I would like to approve them just as they were written. I think the committee took their time with them. I mean, this evolved over several years of work, I believe, with a lot of different people brought in. I believe it is consistent with our plan of conservation and development, and it would definitely serve the general health, welfare and safety of the community. Almost by definition, it'll do that. I also think this will be good for the town. Like when we pass the architectural and community design standards, we haven't received any negative feedback from developers. I mean, when you make it clear to somebody what's required, they're happy with that than with some ambiguous thing that we can kind of say, oh, that is or isn't. I mean, this is very clear what's required, and I don't think people will have an issue complying with this. So I'd support it.
Good. Anyone else? Commissioner Lessing?
I'll just want to thank the committee. I think they put in a lot of hard work on this. This is not an easy undertaking. I'm very happy with the new regulations that we're going to vote on right now, and I think it's really going to benefit the town and especially downtown as well. So I'm going to vote in favor of this.
Anyone else? I agree. I'd also like to thank the committee. Commissioner Barrett is correct. This has been a major undertaking to get to this point in time and involved various different commissions and groups in town. A lot of people have spent a lot of time on this, including our commission in planning sessions as well. So I commend the committee and thank you for your hard work. It's really going to benefit the town quite greatly to have walkability, trails, bike racks, and it sends a message that the kind of development that we want here is consistent with this to enhance the character of our community. So I do agree. I think that this is consistent with our plan of conservation and development, and that was established in the record. I think that our time and experience does indicate a need for this change. I don't think that Fairfield has sufficient regulations or infrastructure around pedestrian and bike access and trails, and that the need is demonstrated and warranted, and that it will serve the public health, safety, and welfare for all. Walk a little more and bike a little more instead of driving everywhere. So I also will be supporting the amendment, so thank you. Anyone else? No? We're ready to vote? Okay. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? The item carries unanimously. Next item on our agenda is 1625 Mill Plain Road, special exception of the town of Fairfield pertaining to additions and alterations of Riverfield School. It's in an A zone. Public hearing May 27, 2014. Present Wagner, Alessi, Barrett, Calabrese, Jacobson, Kennelly, Coleman, Corcoran, and Francis.
Again, Mr. Chairman, just to outline what was presented at the hearing. The town of Fairfield makes this application with regard to approval of renovations in addition to the Riverfield Elementary School, which is located at 1625 Mill Plain Road. The existing building, as represented to you, is 45,049 square feet. The proposed addition would be an additional 16,390 square feet. The proposed addition will allow for a removal of all 5 portable classrooms that are currently utilized on the campus. Provisions have been made for major improvements of the building's winter ventilation and air conditioning system. A part of the renovations is for an entire new fire suppression system that will be installed in the kitchen, office space, and nurse's office. And those spaces also will be renovated. The renovation of the kitchen will include provision for 2 service lines there's only one right now to allow for more efficient operation during lunch hours. The all-purpose room will be improved and expanded so as to allow for seating for the entire student population at one time for the purpose of assemblies and like. And also there was the design proposal calls for a security vestibule area, completion of the security for the vestibule area. Access to the school campus from Mill Plain Road will be maintained on an egress-only access drive. Access to Lakeside Drive will remain unchanged and function as an exit-only drive. The separate separate driveway serving the parent pickup area will remain separate from the driveway and maintain access to Lakeside Drive, which is consistent with the renovations that have been made throughout other schools in the town, separating those, the drop-off and the bus parking. Construction will be phased over 18 months. That was specifically described to the commission. The phasing has been developed so that much of the construction would occur 2 summer vacations. I won't get into all the specifics, but basically the construction workers would arrive at 7 a.m. and end at 4 p.m. Monday and Friday. And again, the deliveries would be managed. The bottom line is so that the construction and the improvements would not affect or get involved at all with any student activity, and that their safety as they're attending a school would be maintained. The site plan provided herein provides for 112 parking spaces, which increases it from 6 from the current 106. Some issues that were discussed at the hearing had to do with landscaping plan. It was represented that the intent was to add additional screening to the area where the new construction was being proposed. There was a follow-up with the police. The commission received some additional information. Just had some questions on the security issues. That was forwarded to the commission. The vestibule floor plan was sent for your review. And there was a noise control report that was highlighted at the public hearing, and it was given to the commission with a large plan showing the location of the acoustical barriers. That, Mr. Chairman, was pretty much what was presented at the public hearing.
Thank you. I have a motion.
I move to approve.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Corcoran. Second by Commissioner Francis. Commissioner Corcoran?
I didn't see any problems with this application, and noted there was not a great deal of neighborhood opposition, and I don't see any reason not to approve it.
Thank you.
I think it will be an improvement at Riverfield School. And I would, however, like to see that storm drain Mr. Braun was talking about cleaned out on a regular basis. I'd like to see us put some kind of a contingency in for that. And I'd like to see some trees, large evergreen type trees, put in the corner abutting the open space. Southwest corner. For noise deferral and view deferral, since they're increasing the capacity of the school from 400 to 500 children.
Okay.
One of them.
Ready?
Commissioner Barrett.
Yeah, I mean, I just have something to add. I'm actually going to be supporting this application, but I just found it curious during the applicant's presentation. He talked about this increased enrollment. And I thought I had heard that the birth rates and projections were kind of flat. So he directed me to the Board of Ed website to get the information. And indeed, there was a report dated 2010, December 2010, that showed Riverfield going from its current population to 509 students. But on May 1st of this year, they did a revised projection. And actually, it shows it going down slightly across the district, and the new Riverfield projection goes from 398 today, that is the exact number, down to 377. Of course, this information came out after the applicant put together their presentation. What does that mean? Well, I think that I'm less concerned about the traffic or anything than I would be, because the increase in traffic is based on an increased school population. The latest report says it won't increase. I think these schools come up for, renovation not that often, and once they're in line, and they wait their place in line a long time, and it's very important that we keep up with these schools, and I think it's important to actually build them out to, the standard size, which is 504 students on all the schools they built recently. Strathfield, McKinley, Burr, when all those were renovated, they were renovated up to a size that would accommodate, because populations do change. If you look back at the Riverfield population just a few years ago, it was 478, so it does swing a lot, projections change. I think that's my point, is that I think it's a good plan to build at this size. I'm a little less concerned about the traffic than I normally would be, there's really no evidence that the traffic will increase. I'd like to hear what other people say about the noise attenuation. I thought they had a good plan for it, in terms of where they're going to be doing the development. The applicant did say that they weren't going to be doing anything on the south side, where the neighbors did speak about. So, it'd be interesting to hear more about that. But I'm going to support the application. Again, I think it's good. I was very comfortable that the police had reviewed the security, we asked a lot about that, and I think that the right people did review that, so I will support the application.
Commissioner Alessi?
Then I'm very happy I received that email from Deputy Chief Liddy saying that they signed off on the security of that as well. Was the pod being done on the south side, or was that on the north side?
They were removing the pod on the south side.
A new area or something.
Right.
They were calling it a pod.
Rebuilding it and connecting it.
Right. No, I'm glad you came up with those numbers, because, what they have now, the kids are in portables, so it's good to get them out of the portables, which is what we're trying to really do at this school. I have a question for staff. I had asked the CM about signing for deliveries and such. Is that within the scope of this board or no? To put that as a condition of approval?
Can we make a condition of approval that the construction include a guard or other facility for delivery?
I think you
to
can make
check
that
in?
as a condition, unless, and frankly, I don't know that they would have a problem with that, unless there's some issue that the Board of Education has, or the school itself, but yeah, you can make that, sure, I think you can make that as a condition.
I think it's
It would be a recommendation, basically, and I'm sure they would do it. If they can't, we would require them to bring back a reason why, but.
Right.
Can we make it a condition of approval?
Yeah.
I would like to make it a condition of approval.
Yeah, sure. I don't think there's a problem.
Okay, then I would ask whoever.
Anybody delivering to the site has to sign in with the construction manager, is that the?
Yeah, especially during,
Well,
during
we-
school hours.
Do this.
Especially, no.
Oh, okay.
They're
At
delivering,
any and
make
all
it
times,
simple,
yeah.
Yeah, if why don't you have a condition that indicates how they would do that? Maybe they can give us
A plan.
a plan for doing that. Just to outline, the practical way of doing that. Just us saying to have someone there, I wouldn't know how to enforce it without having some specific outlines of how it's gonna be taken. So if your condition of approval is that please submit a plan,
That is acceptable to us.
right,
So that we.
and which would basically be a written out overview.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we'll have time to look at that before construction starts,
Yeah,
in order
yeah.
to work with them to find an acceptable solution.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of grade school kids. We don't want any strange vehicles that don't belong there, not on that site.
I understand.
So,
Yeah. And there was, they have these procedures in place for their workers, and for all the people that are supposed to be there. But the delivery trucks, it's a lot of supplies, it's a lot of vendors and independent contractors coming and going.
Yep.
yeah, so to enter I would say, in order to enter the construction zone or school property, there has to be a sign-in sheet and a guard.
Request for
Requesting
a plan on how they would
ID, address, the whole,
address your concern, yep.
Exactly. And I would ask whoever made that motion to amend it to make that a condition of approval.
So, we've got that.
Is that okay?
For
Yes.
security. Hold on a second, because there's been another request with regard to the storm drain as well as the evergreen. So,
I was-
let's see what we have, and then we'll do it in one shot. Okay? So, anyone else, comments? Are you done, Commissioner Alessi?
Yeah, I'm done, thank you.
Commissioner Jacobson?
I think these changes will greatly benefit Riverfield School, but I also agree that there should be more screening on the south side. I think it's simple enough to do, and it'll help the neighbors that mentioned the noise level.
Anyone else? So, I agree with the plan for security for vendors and independent contractors and deliveries and the like. What we heard from the CM at the hearing about the work on the south side was that they weren't going to be doing any work there. I mean, the renovations are all going to be on the north east area. I understand that I want to be sensitive to the neighbors, and I do. They bought a home, adjacent to a school, and the landscaping isn't what it was. They're not, in other words, as a result of the construction, they're not removing any buffer. They're not altering that right now. So I'm a little less, moved by that. I think that the noise, we asked for the noise report to sort of get to that issue. They provided that. I was very satisfied with the study. I thought that was really well done. I wasn't expecting the kind of report that we got, and we did. So that to me was terrific and ameliorated that concern for me. The storm drain, I'm not really clear about that one. Was there an issue with the storm drain on the southeast
He
side?
commented that there's a lot of waste from the school property after major storms. And
This was the neighbor.
yes, and it sounded like no one ever cleaned it up except him. And I don't know if that's true, but certainly there should be a regular plan by conservation or someone to clean that up once a year or something, because it's open space. My concern about the noise and the lighting, why I would like some large evergreens there, like we put in front of Ludlow, is just neighborhood noise. It's a very dense neighborhood, Lakeside, Robert, Partridge, and it would just be a good time to plant more trees and buffer the noise a little, because it's densely populated and you can hear it. You can hear it? Yeah, you can. And it would just be a good time to install half a dozen big evergreens like they installed in Dozen in front of Florida.
Okay. What are the possibilities with regard to the storm drain?
Well, the storm drainage is enhanced from what exists now. There's substantial amounts of underground detention proposed with, those chambers that remove sediment. So there ought not to be floatables exiting from the drainage system. If that's the concern, I think that's what was alleged at the last meeting. But with the amount of underground detention here, I don't see that as a possibility.
It wasn't clear to me where the debris would have been coming from, and I've been up there.
He made reference that it kind of comes out of a storm drain, but the system is designed to have what you are accustomed to seeing now is these hydrodynamic separators, which are chambers. If there are cups or things that would get into the drainage system, they get separated out in those systems before it discharges. So I think the possibility of having trash, if you will, discharged from the drainage system is remote.
He may have been remarking about a current issue with the sort of legacy drainage system that's there.
Perhaps, yeah.
And they're really redesigning the entire site and drainage on the site with separators and the like. And I think that if there is an issue, there should be a way for folks to report that and get it taken care of. But I don't know that making it a condition.
Yeah, I don't know, I don't know that the extent that if it's an existing issue, you're absolutely right that it is an open space and the conservation crew can get in there and clean it out if it's an issue. It's the first I heard of it, at the last hearing, so.
Yeah.
The only other thing I will say with respect to the potential for landscaping is there is an existing large, I don't know if you on page sheet C3. There's a baseball field down on that part, and then there's some fencing, and then between the fence and the property line, there's a large pipe that's running through there. So I don't know that there's an opportunity to plant along that property line without, it would be on top of the pipe, and if you wanted to plant further inboard, you'd be then, in the middle of the ball field there. So I don't know if that's something that they could reasonably accomplish. And the only thing I will say to that is if you have the traffic report, you may not, but I have one here. There's some aerial photos that kind of show the existing state of affairs with respect to foliage. So I don't know, I think that's going to be a difficult proposition for them to plant along that property line.
It would basically be screening of the fields.
Yeah, well, yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
there's a lot of recreation activity there too.
and I'm one of them. I mean, my kid's in Fairfield American Little
Yeah.
League, and I'm down at that field
lot,
weekly
yeah.
during the spring and the summer.
Do you feel there's
all the
anything
time.
more could be done?
Well, I mean, my personal reaction is that there's a lot of foliage there now, and I'm not quite sure where that would go unless it would to sort of, encroach on the fields.
Oh, no, we want to do that.
Yeah, you know what I
There's
mean?
nothing behind that you could do that?
Well, there's a lot there now.
I'll pass this down if you want to look at the photo.
I
I don't know if this cover photo helps anybody, but.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
John got them.
shows the screening.
So,
There's a row of trees there now.
it is.
I think it would be a practical difficulty for the applicant.
Yeah, well, I mean, but I'm also looking at it just from a practical perspective. I mean,
Right.
there is substantial foliage and, in between the property line.
And you made a good point that there would be screening, not new construction, but the existing facility.
Right, and they're not taking anything away
Can you see it?
from that area today.
Can you see it?
Yeah, got it on iPad.
Place.
Correct.
It's really where I'm coming out
Well, I
on
was
that.
just looking for an opportunity to lessen the noise in the abutting neighborhoods, really.
Yeah,
Because it's there.
yeah,
It's not horrible, but
right.
we can't do anything reasonable about it. I certainly don't want to impede
Yeah.
recreation. It's very noisy.
Yeah.
Like, it's also.
In
No,
terms,
I mean,
in terms of the, issues for anyone and the neighbors, is there like a hotline, a number, a phone number, to call for issues? Like if that particular neighbor saw,
They could do one of two things. They'd call the school, they have a maintenance crew, and talk to the principal, or they'd call the Board of Education.
yeah. What about issues during construction for the neighborhood? Who would they call?
Well, they'd likely call us,
Yeah.
and it wouldn't be the first time.
Yeah.
And then we would contact the
Right.
contractor and the principal of the school.
No, there are occasions when legitimate issues arise that need to be addressed, and the past history with all contractors, in particular that work for the town, are sensitive to those, and when we've brought matters to their attention, they've been addressed in appropriate fashion. So wouldn't expect anything would be different.
It's
with this
easy to
proposal.
get contact with us.
All right.
nothing can be done.
Any further conditions or discussion on these issues? No? All right, so Commissioner Corcoran, we've got three in front of us. We've got, storm drain, the evergreen, and the plan for security. I would suggest we make a condition on the plan for security But I think that with the screening issue it is what it is. It's there, they're not disturbing it, and the storm drain, we might just want to have them post a number or something like that.
All right, I agree with that.
So you modify your motion to include as a condition of approval that they present an acceptable plan for security for independent contractors and deliveries?
That's right.
Okay, and Commissioner Francis?
I'm satisfied. I'm not interested in including recreation area. I just thought maybe there was more space behind it.
Okay, so you're in agreement with the modified motion? It was your second?
Yes.
Okay, great. So we have a modified motion on the table. Any further discussion? We're ready to vote? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Item carries unanimously as, with conditions as stated.
Just need to check real quick.
Next section is compliances. First item is 3482 Post Road, application of Chair Anderson for facade improvements in a design commercial district.
Okay, this is the Total Look Salon in Southport. Your packet includes a pretty detailed explanation of what they're looking to do here. You may recall that several months ago, this commission approved change in use for the second floor that were residential apartments to be converted to the expanded salon. What they'd like to do in conjunction with that is a facade modification, and then they supplied you with kind of a photo simulation or an example of a photo of a similar type project that they're looking to emulate in their photo package. So basically a drive-it system, replace the windows for storefront type window and some mesh awnings over the upper windows in a new signage package, which now it's a wooden sign with exterior illumination. What they're looking to do is a reverse channel letter, and they've got some samples of that. So they're basically looking to upgrade the facade of the building as outlined in their packet. If you've got any questions about that, I will do my best to answer them.
Thank you. We have a motion for discussion.
Make a motion to approve.
Motion approved by Commissioner Alessi. Second.
I'll second.
Second by Commissioner Barrett. Question?
The only, the question I have is on the LED line. That complies with our new standards, right?
Yeah, it is. It's a reverse channel letter, similar to others that we have in town. And nowadays, LED bulbs are what's used rather than neon. It will be behind the fixture, not exposed.
Not exposed.
So it'll just create that kind of halo light.
And I noticed, I think I saw in the plans, the lights that they have mounted on the wall, they say to be picked out by the owner of the salon. I guess it's basically just a rendering there.
Right.
So I just want to make sure that complies with our dark sky night compliance as well.
We can add that as a provision that it.
Yeah, because that's not, that's just a rendering. It's not
That
the
the
exact
specific
want
fixture.
of what they're going to have.
Yeah, that they have to show us the specific fixture detail and make sure it's compliant.
And we're okay with the number that high? Is that okay on our regulations? I wasn't sure. I thought it wasn't allowed to be that high on the building.
Well, the one with the number is the existing condition.
Right, I know. I think on a new rendering, though, it shows it in the same spot.
Yeah, yeah, that's fine.
Okay. All right, no problems.
Any other comments, discussion, questions?
Should I make the condition?
Oh, right, yeah.
You know,
Modified?
Modified,
Sorry about that.
my motion to include dark sky and night compliancy on the fixtures that are going to be added. And do we need to be
Submitted?
submitted first, or
Well, let's just provide those details to us, just so we have.
provide
them
those
on file.
details to you before they put them on?
Yep.
Yeah,
Okay. So, and second,
I'm in agreement with that.
agreement by Commissioner Barrett. All right, good. Sorry about that. So, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Item carries unanimously with the condition as stated. Next Next item is 713 Fairfield Beach Road, coastal site plan application of Jeff Smith to replace flood damaged dwelling in the Beach District.
Okay, this matter is in front of you because it's a coastal site plan, and I provided a staff memo in your packet. I will just briefly go through it. This is one of 6 dwellings in the Lund Court condominium. It's one of 2 waterfront units. It sustained substantial damage during Storm Sandy. They're proposing to replace it on a new pile-driven open pier foundation. It requires a coastal site plan because it's within 100 feet of the beach resource. The proposed style and size of the unit will be similar to the one it replaces and the others there, with the exception that it will now be elevated. There are other units within that complex that are being elevated without the need to be replaced because they were less substantially damaged. This matter was referred to Connecticut DEEP staff for comment. They found it consistent with coastal management policies, and we are recommending its approval.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Motion approved by Commissioner Lessie, second by Commissioner Jacobson. Any discussion on the item? Questions? Commissioner Corcoran.
Is this new construction or just raising the house?
It's new construction. They were originally contemplating elevating it, but it's going to be new construction.
I mean, I like the plan. I think it's a good plan, complies with all the regulations, and it's been passed by DEP. We've even got a landscaping plan, which we don't ordinarily see. Is that required for this?
It's part of a coastal site plan. We
Because it's a
typically get it,
coastal
yeah.
site plan, yeah. So, which is nice, and they've got some native brush to, or bushes to, shield the view and everything. Anyone else? No? All right. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? The item passes unanimously. Okay, so, next item is public hearing. So we're going to take a few minutes just to reorganize the microphones for the members of the public that are here. This is a continued hearing on 3 items for the Furwick Fairchild application. We are in the public comment period. Hopefully we'll conclude that this evening, and the applicant will go to rebuttal. When the applicant finishes their rebuttal, the public hearing will be closed. Want to have everybody have a chance to say everything that they want to say. We have a lot of people that are interested and are here tonight to voice their opinion. I would just ask that you keep your comments germane. If you're represented by a group, we'll hear representation from a group. We don't need to hear from each individual member of the group. So long as you keep your comments germane and succinct, there are no time limits. But this is, I think, our 3rd session. And, hopefully we won't need a 4th. But we do have a curfew at 11 o'clock. And so if we don't finish by then, we will adjourn. Okay? So we'll take a couple minutes just to reorganize the microphone, and then we'll be back in session. Okay, I'll call the meeting back to order. This is the public hearing. Need my glasses. Public hearing portion of our agenda. We have 3 items on the agenda: zoning and subdivision regulation amendments, application of Furwick Fairchild and Associates LLC to amend sections 10.6.13, 10.7.1, 10.9.3, 10.11, 10.12, 10.13, 10.17.3, 28.6.1, and 31.2.42 of the zoning regulations. Item 2 is 110 Berwick Avenue, 145 Fairchild Avenue, application of Berwick Fairchild and Associates LLC to establish a designed residence district on land presently zoned Residence B. And number 3, 110 Berwick Avenue, 145 Fairchild Avenue, special permit and coastal site plan application of Berwick Fairchild and Associates LLC pertaining to a 33-unit residential building. These were consolidated by motion when we started the public hearing. All will be considered in this public comment period, and we're ready to proceed. So just when you take the microphone, please state your name and address for the record.
Members of the commission, Chairman Wagner, and members of the commission, can you hear me, or should I hold this, or?
Yeah, no, that's good. I mean,
That's
if you
okay.
want to bring it sort of to the side, that's fine. Don't try to move the podium, it's on a thing. Yeah, that works.
My name is Catherine Braun. I'm an attorney that the neighborhood group Kings Highway Neighborhood Association has asked to assist them in presenting you with materials that will help you to make a fully informed decision. How I envision handling this in the interest of time is we have 7 speakers, including myself, as a member of my presentation. Every one of us is going to keep ours under 10 minutes, some less, hopefully. So we practiced. So I'm going to present my entire opinion now in terms of my legal opinion. I'm just going to hit the highlights of the letter I just handed out. If there's time, I'll give some concluding remarks, but if there isn't, I won't. I just don't want to hold up and cause us to have to go over another night. So I think my comments are all in my report.
Appreciate that, and these are now in the record.
Yes,
Okay,
correct.
So they are a matter of record.
Okay. So this is our third night here, and preliminarily, I want to address just a couple of what I think might be misconceptions. I just want to make sure it's very clear on a couple of issues that have been discussed over the last 2 nights. And one is, this is not a pretext. Any kind of opposition to this has to do with the unique and very challenging characteristics of this neighborhood, the topography, the years and years of problems with flooding, but not just with flooding, with the actual layout of these roads. They're narrow, they're dead ends. They have had a history of severe parking problems. We all know the service level at the top of the street, and even though it might be an F now, it can become a worse F. Even though there might not be a worse designation, it can still be much worse, and that should be taken into consideration. So any kind of opposition has nothing to do with affordable housing or anything else. It has to do with, you're already putting a 54-unit high-rise across the street. This neighborhood cannot accommodate another one. To do so will be likely to cause a severe impact on the safety and health of the existing residents as well as the new residents on both developments. You're putting perhaps 120 people at the end of a dead-end road with as many cars. So there's no pretext here. Flood hazards have been long recognized by both the town and the state long before this application was ever filed. I'm just going to quote from the wetlands permit. Convergence of these elements in this project area, increased upstream runoff, because this is, again, at the bottom of an 11 square mile watershed, decreased floodplain storage due to all kinds of issues upstream with development, and decreased floodway discharge, and that's because of bottlenecks, and I'll show you on the aerial in a moment, has produced a significant flood problem in the area that is becoming increasingly severe. Over the last 50 years, multiple Rooster River flood control projects have been proposed, some of which have been partially undertaken, which have resulted in flood aggravation in Fairfield. And the rest of the quote is, it helped Bridgeport, it didn't help Fairfield. So if you try to speed things up upstream, it makes it get worse downstream, because there's a bottleneck right below this development where the Rooster River tries to go under I-95, Commerce Drive, and then Metro North Railroad tracks. Those culverts block the water from exiting, and that's one reason we have flash floods in this neighborhood. Even the coastal site review provided by the applicant notes that vehicles being used to evacuate the complex in a flood, this complex being proposed in a flood event, would have to travel for approximately 1/5 of a mile to escape the floodwaters. Flood depths on the lowest points of Fairchild and Furwick will reach 7 to 9 feet during a base flood event, creating at best a very hazardous evacuation dilemma. Flood depths of up to 8 feet will be experienced at the southwest side of the building's parking lot. At 33 two-bedroom dwelling units on less than half an acre, this proposal is obviously extremely dense, especially considering that it lies well within the coastal special flood hazard zone and regulatory floodway. Fairfield's one documented fatality took place in this neighborhood in 2006. And it's our position that placing another perhaps 60 to 90 residents in harm's way simply doesn't make sense. I have
I'll have to hand you this handout. I did a little calculation based on some police statistics that are in the record, and what I came up with was all different types of service calls to this neighborhood. If you average them over the last 4 years on Furwick and Fairchild, there's about 35 a year, which is about 3 or 4 a month. That's a lot of service calls of all different types. If you're going to now double or triple the population at the dead end of the road, it's going to go up proportionately, and I don't think the road's going to accommodate it. So I'll just hand that little calculation out. Should I bring it to this end or that end? Okay. And again, that's in the record. Another issue is the wetlands permit. It's been mentioned several times that this will help alleviate flooding. The fact that we had to reduce a pre-construction runoff from a 10-year flood, a post-construction runoff from a 10-year flood to a pre-construction level of runoff from a 2-year flood. All that means is it's not going to add to the flooding, but it won't solve the flooding. This flooding has been there, it's going to stay there, it's not going to get any better, and there's nothing in this project that's going to help with the flooding. All that it basically does is you have to have the living levels above the base flood line, which is a 100-year flood line, and that it does that. It's on stilts. But it's not going to solve the flooding problem. The flooding problem is profound, severe, and will continue, and probably will get worse. So the fact that a wetlands permit was given has nothing to do with solving any kind of flood problem. It just isn't going to generate more water because there's enough of detention underneath the building to hold it long enough so that the runoff will be as if it's a 2-year storm. But as you will hear and probably have heard, there are flash floods, there's flooding of 2 to 3 feet even with moderate rain, so it's not going to solve any of that. The Coastal Area Management Site Plan Review concluded that this is inconsistent in at least 2 policies. One is general development in the master plan as well as the shore area plan. Both cite the goals of reduction of density in the shore area, and the master plan goes on to cite the goal of directing development away from the shore area and the natural floodplain. Also, regarding sewer and water lines, inconsistent. I just want to point out, in the code enforcement, there were some comments about, at the code enforcement meeting, which is basically an informal concept review before plans are necessarily filed or complete, comments might have been made. These are not official hearings, and nobody is bound by any comments made. It's basically to assist the applicant to help improve their proposal. So any comments made, especially when it was before the traffic study had even been provided publicly, are simply, it's inappropriate to state you're not allowed to change your mind or add further comments at a later date. Our public officials who made comments here at the hearing and might not have made those same comments at a code review, it really doesn't matter. It's completely irrelevant. There was no parking survey done. I would imagine that they probably have one on rebuttal, but I don't know. We did a parking survey, and we hired a parking expert. You have the report. The traffic consultant basically said the ITE, which is the book everybody uses, that's not even really a guideline. It's a bunch of data and statistics from various other things that have been done. It doesn't necessarily relate to the local conditions. To do the local conditions, you have to do your own survey and study, and our town engineer did that. He's a member of the ITE. He compiled some data, which I handed out. We also collected data, and our traffic consultant concluded that our data basically supports the same conclusion that our town engineer stated, which is there are more cars that park than what is being proposed. So our zoning regs call for 2 cars per unit in a DRD, or perhaps down to 1.5 if this commission considers that acceptable based on all the other factors. Our statistics, looking at 4 different sites around town in DRD areas, concluded about, if you average them, it's about 1.9. And when town engineer Hurley spoke, I believe he said, you know, most of these areas, they provide, say, 1.6, 1.7 per unit, and there's usually overflow parking. Well, we found the same to be true. So that's really what we're showing, that there will be overflow parking. You have 41 spaces for 66 bedrooms. Right across the street on the Garden Homes development, you have 54 studio or single bedrooms, and they have 68 spaces, which is about 1.26 per bedroom and per unit, because they're all single bedroom. So here we have, the ratio actually per bedroom is only 0.62. We think it's going to create a severe problem, perhaps 25 to 30 cars if you consider 1 car per bedroom. And it's impossible to predict the future, but if you look at what people do in this town, we're not in a big city, we don't have a lot of transit, people don't live in Fairfield expecting to walk to the bus stop to go to the store. In fact, the bus stop is at the store, as far as I can tell. So it's not appropriate to compare us to, for instance, San Diego, which is what our traffic consultant mentioned. There are studies that are done, but that doesn't mean it applies to our town. In our town, people need 2 cars per unit, basically, 2 spaces per unit, which itself will create a safety hazard, because once you have the musical cars that goes on at night when there's not enough parking, that's a problem. When you add the flood issue in, where people can't park, they have to move their car up the road, you've heard that already, that crunches it in and makes it even worse. There's no parking on Kings Highway. Then you have the other unique situation in this neighborhood, which is when you have even moderate rain, people in these 2 developments on Garden Homes and Furwick, Fairchild, they're going to want to move their cars or be stranded because nobody can drive their car through 2 feet of rain, as happened earlier in May. And they're going to, the first time their car gets wet, that's the last time they'll park down there. So it creates a nightmare scenario, which itself will lead to further issues. Many parking complaints, more calls to the area, the streets are narrow. When you park on both sides, it's narrower. All these issues will combine to create what we believe will be a public safety hazard. A member of our group will talk about the affordability plan. Basically, the 8-30G, it allows developers who want to put affordable housing in a reprieve from density and other zoning requirements. But they have to follow the law too. They have to provide enough specifics so this commission can enforce the affordability plan. If it's not specific enough, how is this commission going to know you didn't do it the right way, you didn't market it the right way? You know, how many people are in the good units versus the bad units? We believe the plan that's been proposed as a mandatory requirement of this application is not quite specific enough, and therefore it will make it very impossible for you to actually enforce the law. Because why would we break our zoning laws to put something in if they aren't even going to give us what they're supposed to give us? And we don't know that. I presume they are well-intentioned? Yes.
So, so we have an affordability plan that was submitted by the applicant?
Correct.
Right. So can you cite 2 specific portions of this which are incomplete or ambiguous and that don't comply with the statute?
A member of my group will do it in more specificity, but for one thing, it doesn't identify the actual person who's going to be responsible. It says it will be us, but we might pick somebody else. It also does not have the marketing plan with a degree of specificity that's required. And I'm going to leave it to a member of my group to give much more detail about that. Regarding the law, we've heard a lot about, yes, appeals take place. I handed out some law. Towns can win. The issue is, you know, there's a problem with not enough affordable housing, but that does not defeat zoning rules or zoning regulations. It simply gives a vehicle by which an applicant has a little more power when they go to court. It doesn't change anything about this zoning commission's statutory mandate. We believe you should not change the regulations. You should not add this new regulation which allows high-rise apartments on a much higher, taller, filling up more space with less parking. You don't need it. You have DRD right now. That's already expanded from what our regular B zone would allow in this neighborhood. And then you also have more flexibility if someone is already, with our current regulations, proposing affordable housing. So we have very flexible, very expansive zoning regulations now. There's absolutely no need to add another regulation which will make it pretty much as of right that anyone can come in and put a high-rise next to anybody else in town. It shouldn't be done. It basically ties this commission's hands. I have a bunch of examples in my letter, and I'm going to just read the statutory mandate that you have. Our zoning regulations should be designed to lessen congestion in the streets, secure safety from fire, panic, flood, and danger, promote health and general welfare, provide adequate light and air, prevent the overcrowding of land, avoid undue concentration of population, facilitate the adequate provision of transportation, water, sewerage, schools, parks, and other requirements. These regulations should be made with reasonable consideration to the character of the district, its particular suitability to these uses, and to conserve the value of buildings and encourage the most appropriate use of land throughout the municipality. That's our overarching mission for any zoning regulation. This zoning regulation, if passed, will basically prevent you from doing that. Anytime something comes in, it will almost have to be approved. So we don't need to have this regulation. You have the flexibility now to provide as much density as is needed. And that mandate is not changed by 8-30G. All 8-30G does, it basically shifts the burden from the applicant to the town if it goes up on appeal. So now instead of the applicant proving the town made a mistake at the hearing, the town has to justify its denial. And some of the code words which I'm sure you've heard, it has to be more than a theoretical possibility that some harm to public safety or health could result, but it doesn't have to be a likelihood. So somewhere between a theoretical possibility and a likelihood, you have to make some kind of finding of specific harm to the public interest. But you need not establish that the effects you're trying to avoid by denying this will be definite or more likely than not to occur. So where does that leave us? And my thought is, if the opposition to this development can show you specifics that are reasonably likely to occur, I believe that would satisfy 8-30G. Again, more than a theoretical possibility, but it doesn't have to show that it's a likelihood, somewhere in between there. The commission is still the finder of fact. It weighs the evidence. It determines the credibility of witnesses. It determines which experts to listen to, which not to, and it doesn't have to hold any one expert over any other expert. You've had two experts already. You have the chief of police. You have the town engineer. We have a report. We didn't have the budget to bring our guy down here, but you have his report. And basically what he's saying is, look at the local data when you decide what the parking needs are of your town. And there was no parking study done so far. So that's all. Please don't change the regulation. Also, we don't believe you should change the zone. Okay, that should be denied. These are narrow dead-end streets. You've heard many, many details about this. This would violate all these concepts that I just listed: undue concentration of population, congestion, safety, things like that. Now, I'm going to just mention a couple of sites in the master plan. I don't think this complies either. This application should be denied on its merits. The master plan calls for strategies in this area of Tunxus Hill: revitalization, redevelopment, upgrade, visual quality, more landscaping and greenery, preserving the existing multifamily housing stock, promoting use of Residence C zoning for rental units. And the revised planning goals on page 37 of the master plan are community appearance, reducing population density in coastal areas to reduce flood risk, providing local parks and playgrounds within short walking distances from residential areas, protecting and enhancing community character, and strengthening safety. So I'm going to submit a couple of sets of photographs that people have taken of the area so that you can see. Okay, this is the April 2006 flood. I believe it was a 25-year flood. It wasn't even a 100-year flood. That's the flood where the woman unfortunately died. And I believe waters were waist to chest height at the bottom of Furwick and Fairfield. I'm just going to submit these in, and the next set is a set of pictures from, I have two sets of those. I also have a photograph from May 1st, 2014, when we didn't have a major storm. We had some rain for a couple days, and it caused a couple feet of water on the end of these two roads. And just to sort of back up the data collection efforts, a member of our group, Mr. Jan Reber, he actually went out and looked at four different 4 different DRD communities, Belvoir, The Pod, Black Rock Turnpike Apartments, and Plesco. And his data is in our traffic consultant's report, but I have an affidavit here just so that you know how seriously we took this effort. I'm just going to hand this in. I just want to point out on this map, I got this map, this aerial photo from the town engineer. It's an aerial photo showing the Rooster River. And what it shows is the bottlenecks that are referred to all throughout, yes?
The report you read is from Daniel O'Neill, P. What kind of engineer is he?
A traffic consultant.
Traffic consultant?
Yeah.
Right.
What this shows is the 3 bottlenecks that are referred to consistently throughout the wetlands permit, which is in the file, as well as much of the flood information that you'll hear people talk about tonight, as well as information from FEMA and other authoritative sources about the existing flooding. And what you find is, because this is at the bottom, here are the 2 streets here, Kings Highway, I-95, Commerce Drive, the railroad tracks. The Rooster River wends its way down towards Ash Creek. There's a bottleneck at I-95, and especially at the railroad tracks. The water can't get out, it backs up. That's one reason for the flash floods. And another reason is, because this is the bottom of a watershed, everything drains through this area. In fact, the town, at some point, purchased a piece of land on Brentwood to create sort of a natural detention basin, and from there it collects water and then drains it towards the back of Furwick and Fairchild at the dead end of those 2 roads and towards the Rooster River. So you have many reasons why you have this sort of flash flood situation. And I'll submit this for the record. It can be removed from the backing. I'm going to ask Mr. Strauss to come up. He and a couple of other neighbors have gone through the streets, and to back up our parking report, they got another map from the town engineer, and Mr. Hurley actually marked on the map what he believes to be sort of the maximum parking capacity of these 2 streets. He concluded that maximum, without taking away from residence use, flood issues, even the fire hydrant, or commercial use, it's 34 on one of them and 40 on the other. I forget which is which. But once you take away from existing use by existing residents, it goes down substantially, probably to just a few on each street, because the existing residents park on these streets. The commercial tenants and their guests park on these streets, especially the hookah lounge you've heard a lot about. When Brio Hair Academy was there was a huge problem you've heard about. If it comes back, it'll be another problem. And then when you have floods or water, or even just enough water like we had a few weeks ago in May, people can't park down at the bottom. So I'm going to ask Mr. Strauss just to sort of identify some of these markings on the map, and we'll submit this into the record. Okay, come over here so you can talk into the mic. Can you tell me what the little red...
Can you state your name?
I'll state your name.
My name is Albert Strauss. I live at 144 Furwick Avenue.
Thank you.
Okay. The little red squares that are along, that have been drawn in on top of the 2 streets, do those represent where people tend to park now on a regular basis?
Yes.
Okay. And these lines, the white line that goes across Berwick at approximately 165 to 154 street address, what does that represent?
That represents the top of the area where it floods. In the 06, we have a thing that shows you it bottomed out really for the 06 and for the May 1 this year.
So both instances, the water went up to that level where that line is.
That's correct.
And the same thing on Fairchild, you have a line at about 197 to 190. Is that also the sort of water line where the water tends to go up to?
Yes, it is.
And then I note there are 2 other lines, one a little higher at 243 and 6,
Right.
and then another one a little higher than that. What do those 2 represent?
That's another line that when it floods over here, the flood comes up and goes this way. And there's a hump in the middle, as Joe Conlon explained at the last meeting, that this is a higher ground, This is low ground, this is low ground.
So the low ground is at the bottom of Fairchild, and then at the top of Fairchild, and sort of in the middle around 243, it gets a little higher. Does that make it less predictable where the water is going to come?
Yeah.
Okay, and regarding commercial use, have you reflected the cars that would be used by, for instance, the hook-alums that everyone complains about?
The way I told about it is these are blue cars, same here, or parking spaces for cars. That's the available that nobody normally takes that live here.
Okay, and some of those would be used up by commercial use?
Yes.
Okay. And then what happens when there's a storm, for instance, on the May Day storm? Did anything happen, for example, to the person living in 119 at the very bottom of Furwick?
Yeah, the very end of Furwick is 119, and there was a gentleman who moved his car up to 141 and 145, just in between, and he had a flooded car because he didn't realize that this was the line that he had to be above.
So his car got destroyed?
His car is no longer.
And was there an emergency call that night for any reason?
There was. It was just above the flood line at 170. An emergency was called. The response was by an ambulance and a fire truck.
And were they able to get out?
They were able to get out. They backed up and then they turned around.
Obviously, they couldn't go through the floodwaters. Okay, thank you. Oh, why don't you show us the overlay while we're here?
Sure.
Okay, explain what this is.
Okay. The blue is from the '06 flood.
That's April of 2006?
April 23rd and 24th of '06. You can see that it's, well, all over the place. It actually goes out here to Haley, all the way to the flood zone over here. There was approximately 36 to 40 inches at this particular area.
Is that the end of Berwick?
Yes, that's at the end of Furwick.
The dead end?
Yes. We have some pictures behind you.
Okay. And the pictures behind me on the easel, is there anything else you want to point out? It looks like the water is spread all over.
Well, yeah, the water out here is about 10 foot high. It came around this way, and it's about 30 inches high over here.
And where's that?
This is on the top of, near Kings Highway, which is here. It's off of Fairchild and Berwick. It came around this way, and it hit the backyards of the people working on, or living on Berwick.
Thank you.
Before you move off of that, where is this data coming from?
Is this data from your personal knowledge experiencing the storm?
Yeah, this is our personal observations.
So someone actually went out to that area where you have marked 30 feet and measured, 30 inches and measured the water depth?
We're saying approximately, yes, from, the people that told us.
I see Mr. Conlon has a comment.
No.
If you can hold on just a minute. So this is from your personal experience, either observing it or talking to people who experienced it?
Exactly. The one right here is the May 1st storm, and that's right here where we live, so I observed that.
Is that 2014?
That's 2014, 1 month ago.
Okay. And you explained to me something about how fast the water can rise.
Oh, it can rise very quickly. Basically, we watch the sewer at the end of our driveway, and if it starts to bubble up, we better get the cars up the street above this white line that we showed you before, and we know we're safe. But it can happen when you can move your car, and by the time you get back into the house and you look again, the water is up. So it's a good thing you know, took the first instinct and moved your car.
Thank you. Can you just quickly identify the photographs here on the boards? Can you just identify which storm event they're from?
Yes, these are the ones from 2006. You can see how high the water is. This is down at the southern part. Basically, it was over here where that was taken. This is also from 2006.
And for the May storm, did the water remain there for a few hours after the storm event? Or
Yes.
what time did the storm event take place?
The storm event, it was raining from before midnight, but the high tide was about 1 o'clock. And by 2 o'clock, we had a lot of water, and it kept on until about 4:30 or so in the morning. I have some pictures that we took that was about 7 to 8 hours after the rain stopped. I think we have it over there. And I also have a package of them. Some of them are the same, but I actually took some more. This is the manhole that starts to bubble up, and you can see this is the end of the street, the cul-de-sac. This picture was taken from inside our house, like directly across the street. This was 119, the end of the road on the other side where the man who had his car lost.
Okay. In the interest of time, I'm just going to ask you to submit your report about how you walked around and got information about the parking. Just put your name on it. And don't read the whole report.
Okay. Well, I just want to say that over a number of days, I checked both on my own and with many of the people that live on the street regarding the typical evening parking situation in front of their house. I also observed that there were places with cars parked directly across from each other, which made it pretty narrow to get through. And in one case, even though you can't really see it until you get there, it's narrow in one place and then it spreads out again. So,
Why don't you sign that and we'll submit this. Where's your other report with the pictures? I don't think I have it.
what's that?
Do you have another report with your pictures on it?
Yeah.
Or did you turn it in? Okay. So you turned in another report that has photographs attached?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to ask, since you submitted enough for everybody to have a copy, let's not read it and let's let them take a look at it on their own.
Okay.
But did you bring petitions with you as well?
Yes, I did.
Okay, let's submit those. Okay, so I'm looking at petitions. It's called Protest Petition Zone Change. The undersigned being the owners of 20% or more of the area of lots included in such proposed change, or of the lots within 500 feet in all directions, hereby protest the zone change. And we have petitions which I'm told exceed the 20% requirement. I will submit those.
We took an excerpt of the map that the engineering group did. And you have
You need to use the microphone.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
This is the same one, right?
Yeah. All right. All right, it's in one of the packages. The yellow blocks that you see are the signatures of the owners that are within the 500-foot circle. Approximately 75% of all available people to sign have signed. The red in the circle is area that's off our possibility of getting, because you have the highway, you have the flooding area, and you have the streets, and then there's some places where the town of Fairfield owns the property. Yes.
So this is basically just an illustration of the difficulty of getting it, and from what I understand, a lot of the addresses are wrong. I have some other petitions, they're not legal petitions, the neighbors would like to submit them. Okay, yeah, submit your report. That's that. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, Mr. Strauss is submitting another letter with some photographs. And now I would like to ask Carol Pontrelli to come up.
Threshold is the microphone. Okay, let me see. You can hear me okay? No? Hold on. Okay. Carol Pontrelli, 287 Partridge Lane. I'm on RTM District 9, and I serve on the Public Health and Safety Committee. Okay. I'm going to read some prepared statements. I also have a packet where I have the report I'm reading, and any supporting documentation I refer to will be in the package I submit. I will present the assessments of authoritative agencies, including state legislators, engineering professionals, and the Town of Fairfield Engineering Department, which establish the reality and occurrence of the threats to public safety from flooding events to the residents in this site. In addition, I will reference the incident reports from the Fairfield Fire Department, which provide documented evidence of the storm-related flood hazards which occur on this site and have prompted the need to deploy first responders to rescue residents from harm or to neutralize dangerous situations. I'm just using this as an illustration. I'm not sure, it's kind of small, but it will be submitted in your package. This is a FEMA map. It shows 110 Berwick Avenue, 145 Fairchild Avenue. This site is situated within the 100-year flood boundary. It is designated a special flood hazard area by the National Flood Insurance Program, which is managed by FEMA. Special flood hazard areas are subdivided into flood hazard zones, and Fairchild Berwick is in flood zone AE. Properties in zone AE are considered to be at high risk for flooding. Zone AE is defined as the area that will be inundated by flooding events having a 1% chance of being equaled or exceeded in any given year. The site is surrounded by the Rooster River, is in a high-risk flood zone, and Fairchild Avenue is situated in the lowest part of the watershed north of I-95. In a flood zone, the effects of coastal storms and rain events set into motion flooding scenarios which can take a devastating toll on the public's health and safety. Health outcomes can occur through multiple pathways, including population displacement and disruption of services, the need for mass evacuation, hazards from exposure to storm impact, including drowning, post-storm hazards from utility outages, exposure to secondary hazards, including contaminated drinking water, contact with contaminated floodwaters, and mold and moisture in housing, and the health and safety risks from cleanup and recovery activities. The Town of Fairfield, by way of the Engineering Department, has been studying the threats of this flood zone for many years. Storm events combined with the Rooster River have resulted in flash floods, for example, April 2006 and August 2012. The swift running waters from a flash flood rise suddenly, and the reason people drown during flooding is because they are taken by surprise and overcome by the incredible power of water. A mere 6 inches of fast-moving flood water can knock over an adult. It takes only 2 feet of rushing water to carry away most vehicles. In 2002, the state DEP and the town of Fairfield hired Vollmer Associates LLP consulting engineers to investigate ways to provide flood protection. As a result, the Rooster River Flood Control Project was developed, and the project consisted of 3 phases. The third phase added in 2003. This is in your package. I'm reading from a report called the Vollmer Report. The project involved, in part, removing 2 bridges that constrain the Rooster River flow and increase the upstream depth, the construction of minor dikes, some dredging, and the construction of pump stations to reroute floodwaters directly downstream from the 100-year flood zone. As part of the pump station construction, the plan proposes a flood wall along Fairchild and Route 1 to protect Fairchild and Brentwood Avenue areas from flooding by the Rooster River. According to the Vollmer Report, project phases 1 and 2 proposed the removal of 45 properties and later an additional 43 properties from the 100-year flood zone. Vollmer Associate Engineers found that Fairchild Avenue is the lowest spot and special measures would be needed to reduce flood risks in this area. And per table A3, phase 2 of the plan, it included a line item to raise Fairchild Avenue. That's raise as in lift. In all, the plan included some 23 mitigation strategies to make structural improvements, channel improvements, and to add pumping stations at a projected cost of over $17 million, $2007. In April 2006, the engineering department filed the following admonition in the wake of the April 23rd storm event, and here I'm excerpting. The April 23rd storm was a real wake-up call for the area. Approximately 6 inches of rain fell over a 2-day period. The water elevation reached a peak of 11.5 feet of elevation, which resulted in water levels 5 to 6 feet high in the roads. The rain event was statistically equivalent to a 25-year storm. Then, remarking on the potential of a 100-year storm, they write, in the event of a 100-year storm, the industry standard for design is 17.2 feet of elevation in water levels for this area. Thus, in the event of a 100-year storm, the water in the roadways would have been 5.65 feet higher than the already experienced 5 to 6 feet in the roads and on businesses and to homes. The engineering department writes, in consideration of this storm potential, that, quoting, the result would have been a catastrophic loss of property and a significant danger to life, unquote. Continuing and still referring to the documentation, the April storm severely flooded Halley, Brentwood, Hibiscus, Berwick, Rutland, Royal, and Bradford streets in Fairfield and some neighborhoods in Bridgeport. Firefighters evacuated 30 to 35 people, including infants. Elizabeth Schuberger, 71, drowned as a result of the high, swift river waters. The flood caused several hundreds of thousands of dollars of damage to approximately 60 homes and businesses. I'm just going to refer to a map here, which is already out. Voila, yes. This map, and I gotta get my glasses back on. This map is from the engineering department. It's been blown up. All of the highlighted areas represent flooded basements. Flooded basements are a good indicator of how widespread the risks are in this area, and they represent hazards as can be supported by fire department reports detailing the danger from flooded basements and water impinging on electric and gas utilities. The engineering department plainly stated the potential for catastrophic loss of property and significant danger to life, and did continue to press for mitigation strategies. At the start of 2007, our state legislators also recognized the hazard to public safety and proposed House Bill 5454, and taken from the ct.gov House website, the following was posted. I'm quoting just a couple of paragraphs. Representative Kim Fawcett and Representative Tom Drew will testify in favor of House Bill 5454, authorizing funding for the Rooster River Flood Control Project. The Rooster River causes flooding during periods of heavy rainfall, and combined with polluted sewer runoff, poses a significant health hazard to area residents. As a result of the continuing flooding problem, town officials have had to evacuate area residents as recently as spring 2006. Continuing, I am thankful that the Fairfield Legislative Delegation and the First Selectman's Office are giving this project priority with respect to state funding requests. The project is unique and transcends other state funding requests because this has become an acute public health and safety issue. Regarding the sewer runoff, this hazard is corroborated by an engineering expert retained by the neighbors. The health and safety concerns of the legislators is supported by the licensed engineer who reported that the manhole located at the southern end of Berwick Avenue in close proximity to the proposed development is prone to overflow under all storm events, heavier than just a moderate rainfall. The contents of the manhole, namely water and sewage, is expelled through the manhole cover and mixes into the surrounding floodwaters. This is a June 6, 2014 letter that will be in your package from a licensed engineer. In September 2007, Senate Bill 1501 was passed, referring back to the House Bill 5454, providing the approval for the $17 million. However, in 2008, the bonding for the project was rescinded due to economic downturns. So, without mitigation, the health and safety dangers from the flooding persist. Given the recorded history of flooding on this site and the aforementioned grave concerns over the threat to public health and safety of area residents, our state legislative body found it necessary to craft and pass a bill to fund a $17 million mitigation project as an attempt to moderate the flood risks to the area residents. The bill was passed, but the mitigation plan was never implemented. Without the proposed mitigation, the public health and safety issues remain acute and significant, to use the language of our state legislators. There is no strategy in this applicant's project which can mitigate the acute public health and safety issues. The storms, the rainfall, the river inundation, the flooding will not be mitigated, for example, by the introduction of simple culverts or water filtration systems. Instead, the proposed remedy to mitigate the Rooster River flooding, as designed and planned by licensed engineer professionals, turns out to be a complicated, multi-phase, and extremely costly endeavor. The assessment of the Conservation Commission of the site tells us ecologically the site is located in a flood-prone area with low-lying, frequently flooded upland sites. This is, I'm quoting from a document authorized by Tom Stenke and on behalf of the Conservation Commission. It's in your package when I give it to you. Reading just two paragraphs. The site is at the bottom of the 11-square-mile Rooster River watershed. Increased urban watershed development in the Fairfield and Bridgeport has simultaneously increased upstream runoff, decreased floodplain storage, and decreased floodway discharge, has produced a significant flood problem in the area that is becoming increasingly severe. And by way of explaining the impact of storm events in the area, it says, please note, design storm events are not storms that occur once every 25 or 50 or 100 years. They are storms that can occur any time with a 4 to a 1% chance of occurrence in a given year. The existence of these larger rainfall events in a relatively short time span has refocused local concern for flood damage in flood-prone watersheds throughout town, and all proposed development or redevelopment projects should be reviewed in light of these flood concerns. In fact, the low-lying floodplain in the Fairchild-Berwick zone suffers from flood-related hazards, and our town of Fairfield fire and police have been pressed into service to rescue residents from flood events to safe locations and to respond to incidents involving utility shutoff and flooded basements. Incident reports of rescue are numerous and recurring, and there are examples in the package. Included in the group of reports provided into record are examples of the rescue and response activities which require wide-scale response from Fire, Marine 6, Fairfield Police, Town of Fairfield Public Works, the Red Cross, Southern Connecticut Gas, and United Illuminating. The gravity of these flood-related incidents is conveyed by the significant and extensive draw from emergency response resources. The incident reports are real, the threats to public health and safety is on record. Among the examples provided, you will find incident reports documenting this sort of scenario. Recon of the area found numerous houses with dangerous levels of water in the basements, impinging on electrical and gas appliances. This scenario is worth noting when you consider the major flood killer after drowning is electrocution. The utilities of the proposed apartment will be elevated above flood waters, according to the applicant's plan, are considered not at risk for exposure to flood waters. While the utility boxes might remain above and out of reach of flood waters, the proposed apartment building and its residents will be situated in and among and not separated from the electrical network in the entire area. The dangerous outcomes from water impinging on the electrical and gas lines and appliances in the area, and the dangerous outcomes of downed wires in floodwaters are risk exposures to all area inhabitants, visitors, first responders, and also those who might be living in apartment buildings with secure utility boxes. These incidents of exposure to risk demonstrate a scenario of danger and insecurity in this location. It is troubling to consider the consequence of inserting many more people into this scenario by way of a proposed apartment building. The expert views and assessments from FEMA, engineering consultants, our town engineering department, state legislators, and the fire department's rescue and remove from harm incident reports all expose flooding risks and danger to public health and safety in this floodplain. State legislators and engineers have been so concerned about the acute public health and safety issue that they lobbied hard for flood mitigation strategies to protect the public from harm. It is a fact, flooding presents a clear and present danger to the population living in a flood zone. Current residents have experienced the risks from flooding on multiple documented occasions. The trends and forecasts, along with the assertions from authorities and experts, establish a scenario of flooding which is ongoing and part and parcel to the landscape, a landscape which remains vulnerable and without a means for flood mitigation. The applicant's property sits at the lowest spot in the 5-mile Rooster River floodplain and is well below the 100-year flood elevation. The site is flooded and it will flood again. Flooding is an acute danger to people and property. If the proposed apartment building is allowed to be constructed, we will place new residents in a well-documented zone of acute danger. A densely populated site, which has a history of flooding and related flood dangers, does not get more safe with the introduction of more population. The risks to public health and safety will be substantially increased by placing more people into the middle of a very hazardous flood zone. Thank you. Yeah. Actually, when I get a copy, submit that. I have a copy here.
So I think this was all submitted?
Yes.
Okay.
I have the copy to submit.
Okay. The next speaker is,
Hold on.
I'm sorry.
Attorney Brun? Oh, is that coming now?
Yes, it was.
That was yours?
Okay.
The next speaker is Amy Mezoff. Amy has been studying the traffic and safety issues that have been testified to by prior speakers. Thank you. My name is Amy Mezoff. I live on Robin Lane. Excuse me. During the April 22nd hearing, I attended both hearings and I also reviewed them. Well, I reviewed one of them on Fair TV, one was unavailable. During the April 22nd, 2014 hearing, Mr. Galante clarified some of the points raised during his testimony on April 8th, the previous meeting. In reconsidering his methodology, he emphasized that computer models do not take into account the impact that variables at a very specific site would have on the accuracy of data presented. Excuse me. To his credit, Mr. Galante returned to the site about a week before the April 22nd hearing to assess the reliability of the models versus the on-site observations. For example, in addressing turning delays, he stated, and I'm quoting here, you can't just look at the model. There are variables. Delays get skewed. I pride myself on spending a lot of time in the field looking at these things. Staff does the analysis. I also go out in the field not just one day, but several days, nights and mornings. Mr. Galante's credibility is undeniable as an expert in his field, and he rightly questions some of the model's assumptions. It is logical to assume that the computer models are not necessarily the only or even the most accurate predictors of what happens in a specific area in various traffic situations. In fact, both the Garden Homes Management traffic study by Mr. Hilson and the Berwick-Fairchild study were the result of a combination of observation at the site and the use of ITE information models to mitigate or to close that variable gap. Fairfield's town engineering manager, Mr. Hurley, who is also a member of ITE, agreed that the ITE models and studies do not necessarily agree substantially with data collected in the field. At the April 22nd hearing, he pointed out, and I'm quoting here, there are some things that make this a little bit different. In the ITE studies, especially for low-rise apartments, for the low-volume units below 50, the ITE, did only one study. So clearly one study carries little weight when applied as a standard. Mr. Hurley's discomfort with parking data collected from that one study prompted him to take the initiative to collect and present evidence from several comparable local multifamily complexes. This included his own counts of spaces available within these properties and overflow on the street. He offered that data as well as personal experience as a guide for typical parking requirements. But it's curious that both the Berwick-Fairchild study and the Garden Homes Management study relied on actual data from one study done on one day for a 4-hour period. Each one was a 4-hour period, 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon. The rest is presumably based on these computer models and ITE manuals. How heavily are the reports relying on the accuracy of models that neither Mr. Galante nor Mr. Hurley were comfortable with and that prompted additional site visits? Traffic studies are designed to assess the level of safety under certain conditions in order to reduce risk. Though I realize this is a common methodology for traffic studies and certainly does not disqualify this report, it can't possibly tell the entire story. Closing the variable gap, especially in this particularly vulnerable area, requires more in-depth consideration. In this particular case, as you've heard, people's lives may in fact depend on it. Chief McNamara stated, and that is what we heard from our chief of police, and he stated from, quote, his personal experience and his great knowledge, unquote, of the Berwick-Fairchild area and the myriad of challenges to the public safety it presents, especially since 2006, when Brio Academy was located at the end of Berwick Avenue, creating daily parking problems. Also, in that year, 2006, a flash flood took the life of a woman who was, according to newspaper accounts, cleaning debris from her backyard when she thought the storm was over. The chief referred to queuing at the stop signs on both streets as, and I'm quoting here, as blockades, basically to emergency apparatus getting down the street. And he added, you are going to have an increase in that. And he was referring to if this new property is built. And Commissioner Wagner asked the chief a direct question. And I'm quoting here, when there are vehicles parked and in queue at the stop sign, can the emergency vehicles get down the street now? Unquote. The answer was a direct, no, they cannot. Commissioner Wagner asked Mr. Galante, and I found this very interesting, based on the dialogue, and I'm quoting here from what I was watching on Fair TV, based on the dialogue you just had, where it is only 1.5 cars wide, if it is only 1.5 cars wide, clearly 2 cars cannot pass each other. Can another car get into the street from Kings Highway? Unquote. And the answer, oddly, was absolutely. Right or left into the street, yes, unquote. That assertion, I would say, would have to be questioned by this commission. So we have the chief of police using the word blockade to describe the situation, and Mr. Galante, who was referring to cars, not emergency apparatus, insisting that only 1.5 car widths will absolutely allow right and left-hand turns into the street. To me, that defies logic, and no other explanation was offered. There's ample quantifiable evidence before you and in the record. There's agreement from the applicant's expert as well as the town engineering manager that there are different levels of reliability from models and manuals and from direct observation. There is testimony from 2 town managers with a combination of 50 years of experience in the field of engineering and public safety in this town, with supplemental data to support their claims and concerns. There's the chief public safety official for this town with concerns about the insufficiency of the area to manage current traffic conditions based on data he has provided. This is compared with a 1-day observation that is combined with models that you have been told find no significant safety issues with parking or peak hour trips or turning into a high volume road. Raising the density of housing in the area by the not yet occupied Garden Homes building has been, and I'm quoting it, has been accounted for in this report. But does this compound miscalculation upon miscalculation and widen the unsupported variable gap that's there? There are also imminent changes that may directly and adversely impact the project at that site. There are 297 additional employees of Save the Children, which is moving to its headquarters to the Riverview building where our Board of Ed is, which is just about a block away. It's not addressed. It has not been addressed. There's new construction of Walgreens across the street where the old Brown Brothers building used to be, and the traffic, there's going to be traffic generated from that parking lot, and that's not been addressed. These are very close. And also the Lexus Service Center is due to open soon, and though it was included in the study, we can only make an educated guess, which is, again, based on the model. What will the impact of these changes be on these two streets? I believe it is safe to assume that anything that increases traffic volume will have a negative effect. How negative effect that is, again, it can only be an educated guess, and it can only be based on models. Is there a simple fix? This is very important. There was a couple questions about, are there fixes to this? One of the questions was, could each road be changed to allow for parking only on one side? But with a lack of space already, that would likely compound the parking problem, not solve it. Where would the existing residents put their vehicles? Where would the overflow be accommodated? In another part of Mr. Galante's testimony, and I found this very interesting, is that the question that he posed and then answered was, could a traffic light be placed at the end of those streets to mitigate some of the wait times? And according to his own testimony, he answered no, that the state, this is a state road and it would not warrant a light at the end of the streets. So this is an area that combines at least 9 commercial sites with residential mixed in. There is no mention of the impact that commercial properties currently have and how this will affect or be affected by the project in the traffic report. I sincerely believe that Mr. Galante is being as thorough and as professional as he possibly can be. But he is hamstrung by too many variables in a rapidly changing, dangerous, flood-prone area of this town that has no easy fix. And a misstep in this decision tonight, if it's to be made tonight, could have grave consequences. This is affordable housing that will provide 10 units of affordable housing to only 1 or 2 people per unit, according to Mr. Leclerc's testimony, with perhaps 1 vehicle per unit. The Department of Economic and Community Development Title VIII rent calculation assumes 1.5 people per bedroom. So that would mean 3 people in each unit, not 1, not 2. That's the way that it's calculated according to Title VIII. But let's assume that Mr. Leclerc is correct in his assumption. Is it worth putting the residents of the neighborhood and their children, the tenants of both Garden Homes and Furwick Fairchild, our own public safety of officers, EMTs, at a significantly increased risk to potentially provide somewhere between 10, maybe 30 people with reduced rent housing that also puts them in harm's way? There's simply more hard evidence that supports and that demands a denial of the application based on health and safety of all concerned. Thank you very much. Okay, the next speaker we have is Bill Cosgrove.
Good evening. My name is Bill Cosgrove. My home address is 31 Greenbrier Lane in Newtown, Connecticut. Make a long story short, when I have my kids, I live in Newtown. When I don't have my kids, I'm from 165 Berwick Avenue. And I'll tell you that to tell you about my kids, but I do have very specific personal knowledge of the street. I've been there for the last 6 years. I'm just going to get rid of my kids, I'll be there full time. By profession, I'm a career firefighter. I have 27 years as a firefighter. I've had 5 years prior to that as a volunteer here in town. I sit on the board of directors of one of the remaining volunteer companies in town. As a quick resume, I have attained the rank of fire marshal where I work. I have a master's degree in fire science. I attended Sacred Heart University here in town. I'm a member of the county hazmat team. I responded to Fairfield a few months back when a gentleman committed suicide over on Clinton Street. So I think I've been doing this a while. I'm not going to read the entire packet that I've given to you. I will try and highlight it in the interest of time.
Could you just turn the microphone?
Sure, sorry. This project will cause a burden to all of the town services. I need these now. Including the fire department, police, the contracted ambulance services, and emergency management. It's going to put both streets at considerable risk. All right, there will be additional cars, upwards of 30 or more. There will be considering overflow parking on both streets, because we're only providing 41 parking spaces for up to 66 bedrooms. But the parking problems already exist. All right, we get the hookah lounge that comes down past our house at 165. There's only 3 houses left. They use virtually the entire street, just by the hookah lounge. That was without Brio taking up parking spaces. In the current conditions, 2 cars cannot pass each other without one pulling over into a driveway and yielding for the other one to drive past. When the overflow parking exists on both sides, there will be no pulling over. Somebody's going to have to back up. It's going to create a big problem. Okay. The way I've handled this is I have my written word and then I have pictures showing my examples. You can see from the examples that I have provided in picture number 1, there is no way for 2 cars to get by. This is on Fairchild Avenue. All right. When it floods, and it will, 2 or 3 weeks ago, it will become virtually an island. The entire bottom third of the street will become unusable. As rental units, probably the most expensive thing anybody owns is their car. People will not be leaving their car behind. So not only do you have to move the overflow, but 41 people are going to get their car out of there. Where are they going to go? They're going to go up to Kings Highway, which is a no parking zone, or they're going to go across the street by Town Fair Tire and literally be trespassing, because that's a private parking lot. There is no place for these people to go. And as an island, depending on the length of time, you may have to open up emergency shelters. That's going to put emergency management at risk. Not at risk, but at a burden to relocate people. All right. In the way that these storms come in, the way that this thing floods, that manhole, like the gentleman said before, when that water starts bubbling up, they need to move cars. Well, as you can see in photo number 2 of my packet, the water's bubbling up, manholes will lift and move. When that happens, especially when it gets to a point where it's above, you can't see, a fireman or an EMT or whoever, if they fall through that now open manhole, they will go to the bottom underneath the sewer and there's no way out. That puts them at considerable risk. They've had to make rescues. You can see the pictures of it. And it's almost like walking through a landmine. If you get in once and you get out once, that's great. How many times are you going to keep walking through, hopefully not falling through that manhole? So the more people you have to go rescue, when the fire department has to go rescue, and the more trips they have to make, the greater their risk. Okay. Okay, you can see from my picture number 4, which is very similar to this one down here, you have firemen literally carrying children. If that fireman falls through an open hole with a kid in his arms, they're both gone. This is just really a dangerous situation. All right? You have children playing in the street, riding bicycles, playing ball, as cars are now backed up or parked on both sides. If another car comes down the road, they have to literally jump into a front yard, which is great when there's no cars. With the additional cars parked on both sides, now they have to try and juggle and hope, get in between 2 parked cars to get on the street. You have a lot of people who drive down Berwick thinking it's a through street just like Brentwood, and then they get aggravated, have to turn around, they come flying back up. The children are going to be at risk. There's no continuous sidewalks going up and down Berwick. Everybody has to walk in the street. Because nobody's going to walk on a sidewalk, then go to the street, then walk on a sidewalk, go to the street. So they're always on the street when they go to school. All right. One of the maps that was submitted, excuse me, I believe it was a Google map. The way the map itself looks like is that Berwick goes out to Brentwood as a through street. It is not. It is literally a swamp based on the levees. So that one map is, and it's not this one here, it's on a Google map, and one of the applications is very misleading. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. There is no way out of there. It's a dead-end street. All right. Now, fire trucks, I went over to the firehouse over on Jennings Road with a tape measure. Fire trucks are 8.5 feet wide. The door on one side sticks out 2.5. The door on the other side sticks out 2.5 for a total of 5 feet. Plus, the 8.5 is 13.5 feet. I'm not an engineer, but I parked some cars on the road and got tape measures. They measure anywhere between 9 feet 10 inches and about 14.3. The average being 12 foot 0.17 inches. So if there's a medical call, because one of the things that you have to pay attention to is the entire street is at risk. A lot of times you hear, well, can a fire truck get to that house or get to that building? They may be able to drive to the proposed building, but nobody can say where the heart attack's going to be or where the medical call's going to be or where the fire's going to be. So when they have to stop anywhere midship of those streets, they need 13.5 feet. If you're dead center and people know how to park correctly, which is another issue, just to get out of the truck to grab the medical bag for anybody on those streets, not just can they get through to the end of the dead end.
Did you make those measurements yourself?
Yes.
And when did you do that?
Prior to the April 8th meeting. The exact date I don't remember.
Recently, April of this year?
Yes. And you can see the picture of the actual door.
Are the measurements in your letter?
Yes. Now, one of the other things that happens with, and that's just for fire engine, the fire truck being the one that carries the ladder to get to the roof, that pattern needs to be 17 feet for the outriggers to be able to get to stabilize the truck. If there's a fire, and again, it's not just that one building at the end of the street, anywhere midship of any of those streets, they need to open up the roof. By operations of opening up the roof, they let heat, smoke, and gases out of the building, trying to make it tenable for whoever the victim is in the building, and make it easier for the firemen to get in from the front door, or back door, wherever, to get to those people. If they can't get the outriggers down, and that aerial doesn't go up, the roof doesn't get open, the people in that building, any of those buildings, all of those buildings, are at risk. So it's critical that you find 17 feet. You're not going to have it with on-the-street parking. Even if it's parking on one side only, you still can't do it. The other thing that's a big problem is if you had to, you as a fireman, if you had to pull a hose between two parked cars, as you're pulling that hose, if it gets wedged under the wheels, you're gonna hurt your back. When that happens, the town of Fairfield's workers' comp liability insurance is gonna go up. Or trying to pull a ladder off and raise it over your head and carry it between parked cars, or carry it this way. You run the risk of the workers' comp in the town going up. It's not a good idea. Okay, Ross. Okay. The town has already recognized at some point in time that parking is an issue. And for that, the town came out trying to deal with people from the hookah lounge, from then Brio, and they've painted white lines in front of everybody's driveway virtually as a no parking zone.
Who did that?
The town of Fairfield's already done that years ago. So they've already put white lines in front of driveways, recognizing that parking problems already exist just from the current neighbors and certainly from Commerce up on Kings Highway. It's gonna get worse. It's gonna get a lot worse. And then finally, the next biggest problem is snow removal. These are dead-end streets. They are the last ones to be plowed by the town. When you have cars parked on both sides, there is no pushing the snow out of the street. Only thing you're gonna get is burying cars, and then they're gonna have to dig themselves out. At the end of the day, when they come home, they're not gonna be able to park as close as when they left. When that happens, they're gonna slowly move into the street, narrowing the street. Plus, with subsequent snowstorms, they're gonna be narrowing the street. I was listening in the last couple of meetings about road rage and how long it takes to turn left and how long it takes to turn. You know where road rage is gonna come? Is from the guy who dug himself out in the morning, or somebody else takes that parking space. That's mine, I dug it out. And they're gonna go to fisticuffs at the end of the day. That's gonna create a problem for the town, a problem for the police department. That's where road rage is gonna come from, realistically. All right, and it was so bad that one of the storms over the last winter, one of the neighbors hired a private backhoe to come in without parked cars just to dig out the snow so we can get out of there. Because the town was not able to keep up with it, because obviously they have other areas to deal with, or higher traffic areas to deal with, prior to a dead-end street. Understandable, but still these people have to be taken into consideration. All right, hopefully I didn't go over my 10 minutes. Is there anything, oh, I got one more, sorry. Yep, I got it. All right, the other thing was at the end, or just before the last meeting or the first meeting on April 8th,
Yeah,
there was a medical call, ended up being actually a domestic at the top of the street. And how that had no adverse impact on the neighborhood. Well, absolutely it did. My second packet to you as a supplement was that shut down the street. You had the fire engines in there, a couple of police officers, and an ambulance taking up the middle of the road. And you'll see it in here where it was so bad, nobody can get through, in or out. We almost missed the meeting ourselves, it happened an hour later. But there's a guy who lives at the end of the street. He's trapped at the top of the street, pulled over, I don't know exactly where, but he's carrying two things walking down the street. A backpack and his baby in a carry-on car seat. So it absolutely blocks the street. It absolutely has an adverse impact. And again, you can see all those pictures for yourselves.
I just have a question. If this development does go in as proposed, is it reasonably likely that it will pose an added risk of harm in terms of public safety to the population?
Yes, absolutely.
I have a handout that I created. It's just a calculation. It's in the record. It's basically showing there's 54 units at Garden Homes, 33 proposed here. That's 87 units. Bedrooms, 54, if you count studios and single at Garden Homes, 66 here, that's 120. Number of parking spaces proposed, 68 at Garden Homes, 41 here, that's 109. Spaces proposed per bedroom, 1.26 for Garden Homes, 0.62 here. If you followed our zoning regs, normally it would be 2 spaces minimum, which would require 108 spaces instead of 68 at Garden Homes, and 66 instead of 41 at Furwick Fairchild. The shortfall of what's provided versus what the regs would normally provide is 65 if you add up both sides of the road. And of course, it's the commission's discretion to allow less than that, but we anticipate, and based on what the neighbors have testified to, there's already a problem with parking capacity. There aren't as many spaces as would appear that are available for the overflow. So depending on how many people are living, how many people have cars, no one has a crystal ball. But if you have 2 bedrooms, and if at Garden Homes they think they're going to have 2 people in the 1-bedroom units, one person in the studios, well, why wouldn't we have 2 people per bedroom here, or 3, as Ms. Mezoff mentioned? So I would anticipate it's reasonably likely you would have 66 cars for 66 bedrooms. And I'm just going to submit this little calculation for you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So, Attorney Braun, I'm going to take a few-minute recess. A couple folks need to use the restroom, stretch your legs. Now's a good time to do that.
Thank you.
Okay. We'll adjourn for 3 minutes. Call the meeting back to order. Thanks for the short break, much needed.
Thank you.
And you can continue.
We have 2 more very short speakers, and I want to submit something I neglected to submit. This is just the numbers that were derived from the street map that shows the little red cars where current residents park, and Mr. Strauss's testimony. This was supplied by Carol Pontrelli, who walked the streets along with Mr. Strauss and Mr. Conlon, who are residents there. And it basically shows that even though there's a capacity of 34 on Berwick, when you count...
Please. I'm sorry. Thank you. Thank you.
The town engineer indicated there's an initial capacity of 34. Once you take away the hydrant, the hookah lounge parkers, the residents that park on the street now, you really only have 10 on Berwick. And on Fairchild, it starts with 40 that Mr. Hurley noted. When you take away the fire hydrant, the commercial parking, and the existing, right now, resident parking, you really only have 1. I'm sorry, and when you also take away the flood line where the people won't park if there's going to be rain, it's between 1 and 6. 6 if it's not going to rain, 1 if it's going to rain, because people will not park below those lines if it's going to rain. So I'm just going to submit this into the record. Thank you. And now, Ron Magbu has a brief statement. I'm going to hand out his exhibit. Did you already hand out the copies? Or? Oh, okay. I'll hand it out.
My name is Ron Magbu. I live on 141 Berwick Avenue, and I am here to talk to you about the traffic concerns, the parking concerns, and flooding concerns, and how it relates and will pose potential safety issues if this complex is built. On the second page, I have a picture of someone traveling east on Kings Highway East, and in that picture, it's very difficult to see any cars moving back and forth from that street. And I normally try to make a left out of that road, especially in the mornings, and it's very tough. I actually have to make a right and then do a U-turn to get back going east on Kings Highway East. So it definitely, the increase in traffic from these condos, from these housing units, will definitely cause this intersection to be much more dangerous than it is currently. One thing that hasn't been shown too much is where the lowest point on Furwick Avenue is. I have it circled in orange on page 3, and right now there are 5 houses currently southeast of that, and that's where this complex is proposed to be built, and that's where all these cars have to be moved whenever it rains over 2 inches. And on the bottom part of that page 3, you could actually see the rain developing at that spot. And that's where, if we get flash floods or rain over 2 inches, it could definitely cause cars to get lost. And since I've been there since 2007, and 2 different neighbors have lost their cars because they didn't move their cars in time, because the floodwaters moved up so quickly that the electrical wouldn't start their cars anymore. My next point on page 4 is flooding and how it relates to our safety concerns. When I moved to Berwick Avenue, there was a house right behind us on Brentwood. And when they tore that house down, they built one of these condos where it was the garage on the bottom and the housing unit was actually on top. And the problem with that is the lot was elevated about 1 inch. And because of that, all the rain now goes from Brentwood down to Berwick Avenue and accumulates at that part of the map that I showed you earlier, which was the lowest point of Berwick. And therefore, Berwick always floods earlier than it does Brentwood. I'm not sure about Fairchild, but before Brentwood floods, Berwick is always the first. On page 6, there's a picture of the drain on March 4th, 2014. As you can see, it's almost at the top. This was the picture of the drain for majority of the time. And anytime it rained over 1 inch, we were always very wary of our basements flooding, which was way below the ground level. Also on page 6, you could see all the snow, and as stated earlier by Bill, parking and the street width is already an issue. And as you can see, the drains are covered, and so the snow does take a significant part of the road that makes traveling through Berwick Avenue very difficult. On page 6, you can see pictures from Hurricane Irene on August 29th, 2011. As you can see, there are pictures of my basement. There's about 4 feet of water in my basement, along with the lake that used to be my neighbor's lawn. And on the next page, page 8, you can see on the nassau.gov website, and it shows how much rain we actually got. From Hurricane Irene, Fairfield got about 6 inches. Other parts of Connecticut, like Burlington, got 8.7, and Stockton, New Jersey, got over 10 inches of rain. And you saw the pictures on the previous page. Can you imagine how much more the water would have risen if we got about 10 inches of rain? Page 9, there's a picture of a storm from March 30th, 2010. This was just a spring storm. It wasn't a hurricane or a major storm. It was just a regular spring storm. And our basement flooded. We got about 3 inches of rain. Also, the street flooded, and it rose very quickly. This is one of those moments we actually got flash flooding, and that the rain had stopped, and then the water started to rise even after the rain had stopped. Page 10. This is the most recent one that you've heard a lot about. These are pictures from on Berwick Avenue at the lowest point, April 30th. At night this year, and it only rained 3 inches. As you can see on the picture below, we got 3.76 inches of rain on May 1st, and this is how much rain that we got in our basement and on the streets. My neighbor actually lost their car because they parked right in front of my house, and they were not able to start their car again and ended up losing it. They actually had to evacuate their house, but their front door and back door were both covered with water that they had to leave through a window. And they have a 7-year-old and a 3-year-old kid. So all 4 of them had to leave and evacuate their house because they were afraid of the floodwaters rising through a window. Now this storm actually, our street has flooded a lot, but this is the first time since I've been there that it actually left an odor, a very distinct odor. And I actually, if you see the other stapled file, an email to Mr. Hurley and Mr. Cleary being the Director of Health for the town of Fairfield. And I emailed them because there was this distinct smell of feces. It smelled of thiols and hydrogen sulfide, 2 byproducts of feces. And how do I know this? Because this is what I've worked with thiols before, and I've worked with hydrogen sulfide before. And those are the distinct smells that I smelled, and I asked them to come and check it out and clean it as much as possible. And hydrogen sulfide is actually very corrosive, it's poisonous, and it's flammable and even explosive. So I just emailed them, and then they came and cleaned it up, and it did help. They spread some lime. They couldn't spread chlorine because of the zone that we're in, but it did help a little bit, but it took about a week for the smell to go away. You know, I have a 4-year-old kid and a 5-month kid, and we didn't even go outside just because we were afraid of the toxic smells that we smelled just from this flood on May 1st. And lastly, a lot of us on Berwick Avenue don't have large properties. We don't have acres and acres of properties, but there are a lot of kids on Berwick Avenue. And for the kids to expel their energy and play, a lot of the kids play out on the streets. And because the streets are so narrow and there's barely any parking, it's very tough to play out on the streets with your kids. And if this housing complex is built, it's going to really minimize the amount of time that our kids can play in the street. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me today.
Thank you.
We have one more speaker. I just want to draw your attention to pictures that were submitted by Mr. Magbu on behalf of Joe Conlon, who already spoke. He's not going to speak again, but I want to make sure everyone has this set. Okay, that was from the May Day storm this year. Jan Reber is our last speaker.
I'm not going to try to answer your question, Chairman Wagner, about affordability. That's my deal.
Oh, thank you.
Sorry I had to wait so long. I promise I'll be less than 10 minutes. I'd like to briefly discuss the applicant's affordability plan. It details how the applicant will implement the requirements of 830G to provide affordable housing. The submitted 2013 affordability plan fails to meet some of the requirements of 830G. And I'm going to show you specifically which ones and compare it to the statutes. Without a comprehensive approved affordability plan, the application for 830G status should be denied. 830G is codified in the 830G statute itself and in the detailed regulations of the Department of Economic and Community Development, DECD. I'm not an attorney, but where an observation I'm going to make appears to be a legal conclusion, Kathy Braun has blessed it, so you can blame her, not me. DECD Regulation 830G7 states, quote, a description of the projected sequence in which a price-restricted dwelling units will be built and offered for occupancy shall consist of a narrative and a schematic plan describing the construction sequence and a demonstration that such a sequence will result in compliance with the set-aside requirements of Section 830G. There's no schematic attached to the affordability plan of this applicant. It's important to meet the requirements of this regulation. These units in this proposal are not all the same size. They vary from 750.5 square feet to 898 square feet. That's a range of almost 20%. Are the units designed as affordable to smaller, less desirable units? You can't tell from the affordability plan, but it's clear from the language of the regulation the applicant must, quote, demonstrate detailed compliance that includes, quote, the location of affordable units. He's failed to do so. And if you look at his Appendix A in his affordability plan, he merely says that, well, over time, which units are affordable is going to change. He simply ignores the requirement to disclose exactly which units are the ones initially constructed and offered as affordable. That's a definite requirement. He also fails to address what I think is a less important aspect of DECD Regulation 830G7, which says that there has to be in the plan a proposed procedure by which sellers, purchasers, lenders, or title insurers may, upon request and in a timely manner, obtain written certification of compliance. This requirement is completely ignored in the affordability plan. The requirement's important because if the developer ever sells the building, this information will be necessary. And in the meantime, it allows key parties and you to assess up front any issues of access to the books and records of the applicant while maintaining tenant privacy rights. Section 5 of the applicant's affordability plan states that the developer may designate a third party to administer the plan. His designation is very vague. This affordability plan will be administered by BFA or its designees, successors, or assigns. In connection with its application for site development approval, the developer may identify a third-party administrator. However,
the 830G statute itself states, quote, "Any person filing an affordable housing application shall include at least the following: designation of the person, entity, or agency that will be responsible for the duration of any affordability restrictions for the administration of the affordability plan." The DECD regulations are also very specific. You have to list the person who will be qualified and responsible. That means you need to be assured that the administrator is known and is qualified to administer the plan at the time you approve it. Again, the applicant's plan is vague. And keep in mind that this is meant to be over 40 years. It's very important that at the beginning, you know who's going to be administering this plan and whether they're qualified to do it. The applicant's section, Roman numeral 8, fails to address specifics of DEC Regulation 830G7 requiring a detailed marketing plan. The applicant's marketing plan is vague and incomplete. It simply repeats the general categories of marketing to be done under 830G and names only one specific place to advertise, the Connecticut Post. You need a specific marketing plan, and you'll see in the regulations that there's a long list of the way a marketing plan is supposed to be implemented. It's interesting that the vagary of the applicant's affordability plan on marketing is in sharp contrast to his presentation of calculation of rents. In that case, he took the general language of the regulations and translated it into actual proposed rental dollars that you can analyze. 830G requires a consistent disclosure of details, and this applicant ignores those requirements in his marketing plan. The applicant's affordability plan states that affordable units will be offered on a prorated basis with market rate units as units receive certificates of occupancy. HUD, which has years of experience in dealing with affordable housing regulation, has found that developers sometimes push market rate units ahead of affordable ones when renting. To counter this, you should require that developers submit a monthly report to you that lists all units rented, units available for rent, and affordable units occupied by non-qualifying tenants, along with the rents charged and lease expiration dates, so you can track how the developer is filling the building. This report will also serve as a basis for the annual audit that you can and should perform on the applicant's operations. Attached to each monthly report should be a copy of all advertising the developer is doing. HUD tracks this in its programs and requires developers that have unrented affordable units for 6 consecutive months to engage in an accelerated advertising campaign. Some municipalities restrict a developer from renting final market rate units until all affordable units are occupied. We're just suggesting you require a tracking report. The applicant's affordability plan allows someone who qualifies for affordable housing when they move in to stay in an affordable unit but pay market rate rent when the earnings take them above the affordability threshold. In that case, the next unit available for rent must be rented under affordability requirements. You can see that this can get complicated and even subject to error and abuse if you do not require monthly reporting and track exactly what the rental status of the building is through reports and auditing. Your commission has the right to adopt affordability requirements that are consistent with and that further the objectives of 830G. It's important to assure that the affordability plan is fair and complete. You will receive varying affordability plans in the future, and to be fair to applicants, prospective tenants, and to the public, you need uniform, detailed guidelines to implement an affordability plan. 830G makes it clear that once you adopt the affordability plan, the plan forms the basis for 40 years of enforcement. A vague plan like the applicant's leaves your commission and the town vulnerable to disagreements with developers, a lack of disclosure, and inconsistent implementation of 830G. 830G really, I think, essentially creates a new kind of burden for your commission. You can't simply approve an application with conditions and leave it to zoning enforcement to make sure your decision is followed. Here you have an ongoing enforcement duty that is critical to the very nature of 830G projects. Okay, have I answered your question?
Yes, you did. Thank you.
I'd like to just conclude something that's been bothering me since the first hearing, and that is that somehow the opposition to this project is pretextual. You've heard from the chief of police, you've heard from neighbors, you've heard from us. We've spent a long time analyzing this project. None of this has been pretextual. None of us are opposed to affordable housing. The neighbors are not here because this is a not in my backyard argument. This proposed development shoehorns a big building into a tiny lot in a flood-prone area. It offers the sights, sounds, and smells of I-95 for ambiance. It's not consistent with our town plan. Even the Bridgeport Regional Council expressed concerns about this project. HUD standards for site development require a site that is adequate in size, exposure, and contour, in a neighborhood which is not seriously detrimental to family life, or in which undesirable conditions predominate. Would HUD endorse this site? Are all of the impinging negative factors here really worth it for 10 units of affordable housing? If we could bring the legislators who crafted 830G to Fairfield, would they say, wow, this project is a shining example of everything we hoped 830G would be? I don't think they would. In any case, we're not pretextual. Whatever you decide here, I hope you're not going to conclude that anything you've heard from us is pretextual. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Rubio will hand out his handout. I just want to point out one other point from the prior hearing that I forgot to put in my letter, which is some comment was made that this is actually creating a through street. You can't create a through street on private property. So I believe if a through street was going to be created to help alleviate the problems of putting these two big developments at the end of a dead-end road, that would probably require RTM approval, and that certainly cannot be made a condition of approval for this project. This cannot be a through street, it's private property. And by the way, any other private properties around that are informally allowing, or even by agreement allowing people to park or travel to get around problems, that's private property. No requirement, can be revoked at any time. It doesn't solve the problem. So I would ask, again, based on all the evidence, that you deny this, and that if you do choose to deny it, be very, very specific in your denial. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any other member of the public that wishes to be heard?
Hi, Josh Garskopf. I live on Sachem Road. I'm a RTM rep for District 5, which is this district. I'll be very brief. We've heard a lot of very compelling testimony tonight and at previous meetings. One comment I wanted to add, an experience I've had several times on Kings Highway East, heading east. We have heard a lot about traffic on these two roads for good reason, but there's also hazards on Kings Highway East from this. And I've had this experience heading east in the right-hand lane and the traffic being completely stopped, parked. Normally traveling 35 or whatever miles an hour, it's parked because a car is trying to turn onto Fairchild, which is a very sharp, as we've heard, very, very sharp turn. And if a car is coming out, a truck cannot get in. And that, I've seen this back traffic up on Kings Highway and force cars to start doing the sort of jog out into traffic to go around it. So I just want to enter that into the record as my experience as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other members of the public?
Good evening, Chairman Wagner, members of the Commission. I stand here tonight in support of the Furwick-Fairchild neighborhood and in opposition to this project and the associated applications that come with it. In my opinion, this project is too big, it is too invasive, and it intrudes upon a Fairfield neighborhood. In addition, this project threatens the public safety and the public health of this neighborhood, as well as the local environment and the Rooster River area of our town. I would like to thank all of the speakers that came forward tonight, Catherine Braun and her team, and all the speakers from the previous two meetings for your hard work and your fact-finding and presentations. Thank you for that. And I'd like to thank you, the Commission, for your dedication to our town and your public service, and for your thoughtful and thorough consideration of these applications.
Thank you.
Thank
Could you
you.
just enter your name and address for the record?
My name is Kevin Kiley. I live at 237 Steiner Street, and I'm a member of the Board of Selectmen.
Thank you very much.
Hi, Ellen Jacob, District 9 RTM. I am not going to take your time tonight. I will just hand these in. There are 3 statements urging you to deny. one from Gaylord Meyer, RTM District 1. She's also Vice Chairman of the Public Health and Safety Committee, one from myself, and one from three people who had to leave: Virginia Sanford, Catherine Montgomery, James Wickersham from Hillside Road, Reading Road, and Daybreak Road. Thank you.
What does the submission from the Health and Safety Committee, is that explained? What is that committee of the RTM?
It's an RTM committee.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Paul Gustafson. I'm a resident here in Fairfield. I have a few concerns about building a 33-unit apartment house across the street from a 54-unit without doing anything to the infrastructure. I think the impact to the parking after the 54-unit has matured hasn't been realized yet. To start an additional 33-unit before the impact is realized would be irresponsible, I think. I think that perhaps this half-acre being proposed for development would be better suited for parking and landscaping for the newly built 54-unit. This would ease the parking concern instead of adding to it. The Metro Design District train station spent $93 million on infrastructure before anybody started doing any developing in that area, and it's still not being done. I think how much money was spent on the Berwick-Fairchild area before we started putting more building in. I don't think it's the right project for the right area. I think it's overpopulated already. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Is there more? So the three that were submitted were stapled together? Thank you. Any other member of the public wish to be heard on this item? Okay. Well, that then will conclude the public hearing portion of the, well, not the public hearing, the public comment period of the public hearing on this application. Due to the lateness of the hour, I'm going to hold this public hearing open for another session next Tuesday for the applicant to give his rebuttal as well as further questions from the commission. There's a lot of evidence, new material submitted tonight that needs to be reviewed by us and considered, and we want to have an opportunity to engage in dialogue with the applicant in their rebuttal. So with that, forgive the delay, but a little moment. Yeah, let's get for the record. Yep. Yep. So just before we had a discussion off the record, so for the record, and Attorney Leclerc, just state your name and.
Yeah, for the record, Brian Leclerc, Bertram, Moses, and Devlin on behalf of the applicant. That's acceptable. We will present a rebuttal next Tuesday. We'll have our team here as well, and consent to the extension necessary under the statute as well.
Thank you, Attorney Leclerc. All right. So we will hold this public hearing open and adjourn the meeting.